The night I died, I heard Sophia laugh with Ryan just outside the door of my hospital room. They thought I couldn't hear them, couldn't see them whispering about the research award they'd share, the future they'd build. I had spent my life kneeling at her feet, giving up every breath, every chance, every quiet hope, just to see her shine. And as my body withered, she didn't even look back. But death wasn't the end for me. When I opened my eyes again, reborn with all the bitter memories of a man discarded, I didn't scream or curse the world, I simply turned away from her. This time, I let her watch as I signed away the engagement papers, as I packed my bags without a word. I smiled when she cried. I kept my voice steady when she begged me to wait, to understand, to give her time. My revenge was quiet, measured, a blade honed by years of swallowing every ounce of pride. I left no scars on her skin, but every morning she woke to an empty house was another cut on her heart. I built my new life on the coast, teaching children about the sea, while she remained trapped in the maze of her ambition, haunted by the ghost of the man she thought would never leave. Let her search for me, let her make excuses to Ryan, to Deborah, to herself. In the end, I owed her nothing but the emptiness she left me with. And now, when the tide pulls out and the sun rises over water that reflects no one's shadow but mine, I know I have finally won. Silent revenge is the sweetest kind, it leaves no blood on your hands, only peace in your heart. Welcome to Story Heaven, where every betrayal turns into silent revenge and leaves you wanting more. Watch the story till the end and let us know in the comments how you felt about it and what kind of stories you want to see in the future. Make sure to subscribe and like the video, your support means the world to us. John was never the loud one in the room, he was the steady tide, the quiet hum of the ocean before a storm, the dependable man who cooked breakfast while Sophia raced out the door with her bag slung over her shoulder. In their early years together, Sophia glowed with possibility, her eyes sparkled with ambition, and every word she spoke was a plan, a milestone, a dream pin to the future. John fell in love with that hunger, believing he could be the soft place she landed when the world was too sharp. But Sophia never wanted soft. She wanted fire, she wanted applause, accolades, the world at her feet, and she didn't care who bled to make her path clean. John became her shadow, carrying the weight of bills, laundry, late-night meals, and the endless silence that fell between them. She told him she loved him in passing, as though it were a phrase to punctuate her sentences, but her heart was always elsewhere, in research labs, conference halls, and finally, in quiet corners with Ryan, her eager assistant. Ryan was everything John wasn't: talkative, bright-eyed, willing to orbit her son without expecting anything in return. He never questioned Sophia's long hours, never minded when she cancelled dinner again, never stood in the way. And Sophia rewarded him with smiles John hadn't seen in years. But John wasn't blind. He saw the looks, heard the laughter, noticed how Ryan lingered in their kitchen while Sophia pretended nothing was wrong. The betrayal, when it finally came, wasn't a fiery explosion, it was a slow seep of poison into his veins. By the time he died, John was empty, hollowed out by the woman he had once believed in more than himself. Now, reborn, he watches her from afar with a cold clarity. He sees the crack in her voice when she tries to call, the tremble in her hands when she mentions the wedding they'd planned, and he feels nothing. His silent revenge is simple: he will live the life she never wanted him to have, free of her demands, her ambition, her insatiable hunger. And in that freedom, he finds a peace that burns brighter than any love she could have offered. Sophia had built her world around the certainty that John would always be there. He was the steady ground beneath her ambition, the quiet nod in the background as she took the stage with her latest discovery. When he left, silently and without drama, her first instinct was to think it was a test. He would return, tail between his legs, ready to forgive her one more time, ready to hold her when she grew tired of chasing accolades. But the days stretched into weeks, and his silence became unbearable. She started visiting the lab later, staring at the empty doorway as if expecting him to walk in. Ryan noticed the way her eyes flicked to the door, how she jumped at every ringing phone. He offered comfort, his hand brushing against hers in small, lingering touches. Sophia brushed him off, telling herself she didn't need him. What she needed was John, her rock, her constant, the man who once built his life around her. Meanwhile, John lived by the sea, his days filled with salt air and the laughter of children he taught about coral reefs and tides. At night, he lay awake, remembering the nights he spent cooking for Sophia, watching her sift through research papers as if he was invisible. The old ache was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Instead, it hardened into something cool and sharp. This was his revenge, not loud, not messy, but a life built without her. Sophia couldn't bear the thought of him finding peace without her. She called mutual friends, feeding them small lies, that he was depressed, that he needed help, that he was punishing her for nothing. The more she tried to weave her story, the more cracks appeared in her confident facade. Deborah, watching from the sidelines, saw it first. Sophia wasn't mourning love, she was mourning control. One night, as Sophia sobbed on her couch, Deborah asked softly, "Do you miss him, or do you just miss owning him?" Sophia slapped her, tears burning in her eyes. "You don't understand," she spat. "He's mine, he belongs with me." But John belonged to himself now. That was the part she couldn't accept. He didn't send angry messages or cruel words. He didn't beg for her to see him, to remember how he once held her through sleepless nights. Instead, he built something new, quietly, while her world unraveled without him. And in the quiet hours, when guilt and grief tangled in his chest, he told himself this was the price of freedom. It was worth it. John told himself he wouldn't look back, but every night the past bled through the cracks in his resolve. He'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling of the small room he rented by the coast, listening to the wind batter the thin walls, hearing in that hollow noise the echo of Sophia's laughter. Sometimes he'd dream of the way she used to press her hand to his chest when she was tired, murmuring soft half-promises about the future, promises he once believed with all his heart. But dawn would come, dragging him into the cold grey light of another day, and he'd feel the emptiness settle in his bones like a sickness he couldn't shake. He hated himself for missing her, for wanting to believe that maybe, somewhere deep inside, she regretted what she'd done. The rational part of him whispered that it didn't matter, that she was the same woman who left him to die alone while she built a future with Ryan. But love isn't rational, and neither is grief. During the day, he busied himself with his students, teaching them about tides and marine ecosystems, showing them how the sea hid entire worlds beneath its shifting surface. And as he watched the wonder in their faces, he felt something fragile growing inside him, something like hope. But then he'd return home, and the quiet would press against his skull until it felt like he might break. In those moments, he would pick up his phone and stare at the last message Sophia had sent him, a clipped apology, a half-hearted plea. He never replied, but he couldn't bring himself to delete it either. It stayed there, mocking him, a testament to everything he'd lost and everything he was trying to become. Sometimes he imagined her standing in his doorway, hair damp from the rain, eyes wide and desperate, begging him to come back. And in those visions, he wanted to gather her into his arms and tell her he'd never stopped loving her. But he also wanted to turn away, to let her feel the chill of a life without him, to make her understand what it meant to be left behind. The nights were the worst. The wind would howl outside, rattling the window panes, and he'd feel so small, so fragile, like a single grain of sand against the weight of an ocean he couldn't stop. He'd think about Ryan, about the easy way Sophia had laughed at his jokes, the way she'd looked at him like he was the answer to a question John hadn't even known she was asking. He wondered if she missed him, if she lay awake at night, thinking about the meals he'd cooked, the soft things he'd whispered in the dark. But another part of him, bitter and raw, told him she probably slept well, wrapped in the security of someone else's arms. Every day felt like a war between the man he wanted to be and the man he'd been, the one who would have given up everything just to see her smile. He tried to remind himself that silence was his revenge, that by refusing to play her games, he was winning. But some days, it didn't feel like victory, it felt like bleeding out slowly while no one watched. Still, he refused to go back. He refused to call her, to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still haunted him. Instead, he forced himself to keep moving forward, building a life she couldn't touch. And yet, in the deepest part of him, a question gnawed at his resolve. If she stood in front of him now, crying, promising to change, would he have the strength to walk away, or would he crumble, just like before, and give her the last pieces of himself he had left? It was that question, more than anything, that kept him awake at night, staring into the dark, begging for the dawn to come. Because in the daylight, he could pretend he was strong, he could teach his students, breathe the salt air, and convince himself he was free. But in the dark, he knew the truth. Part of him still loved her, and part of him always would. One afternoon, as John was sorting through seashell samples with his student, His phone buzzed with a message that made his blood run cold. It was from Deborah. Her words were clipped, anxious. Sophia's coming there. She says she wants closure. She's leaving Ryan. John stared at the screen, his pulse pounding so hard he felt dizzy. He had built this quiet life to escape her shadow, to finally breathe without choking on her demands, and now she was tearing that fragile piece apart again. That night, he walked the length of the beach until the moon hung high overhead, the waves lapping at his ankles, the salt sting biting at old scars. He thought about how easy it would be to simply disappear again, to find another town, another school, another name. But he was tired of running. He was tired of living a life dictated by the woman who had once held his heart in her careless hands. The next morning, Sophia appeared at the classroom door, her hair pinned up neatly, her clothes immaculate, as though this was just another meeting, another day she could bend to her will. The children looked up, startled, and John felt a surge of protective anger. He ushered them outside, closing the door with a soft click. Sophia didn't waste time. "I left Ryan," she said, voice trembling. "I thought I loved him, but I didn't. I wanted something new. But it was you, John. It was always you." Her words were carefully chosen, dripping with practiced sincerity. John felt the old ache tug at his chest, the reflexive need to comfort her. But he remembered the nights she left him waiting, the mornings she brushed past him like he was an annoyance. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping closer. "I know I hurt you. I know you have every right to hate me, but please, just listen, just give me a chance." He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. Part of him wanted to pull her into his arms, to erase the years of pain. But another part saw the trap, the subtle manipulation beneath the tube's rambling voice. He shook his head slowly. "I've listened enough," he said quietly. "All those years. I waited. I gave you everything. I'm done." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "You're throwing us away?" she hissed. "You think you'll be happy here, teaching brats while I build a future you could have been part of?" John felt the ground shift beneath him, the air crackling with the promise of a storm. He saw her mask slip, the same cold ruthlessness that had once convinced him she needed him, that she loved him. And in that moment, he understood. This wasn't about love. It was about control. She couldn't stand the idea of him moving on, of him finding peace without her. He opened the door, voice calm. "You should leave," he said. "We're done." She stood there, shaking, her perfectly polished exterior cracking, but he didn't waver. The students peeked through the window, eyes wide with curiosity, but he didn't care. He watched her walk away, heels sinking into the sand, the ocean wind tearing at her hair. And though his heart pounded painfully in his chest, he felt something else underneath the grief, relief. It was over. Or so he thought. Because later that evening, Ryan showed up at his door, eyes wild, hands shaking. "What did you say to her?" Ryan demanded. "She's gone. She's talking about ending everything. You need to fix this, John. You need to fix her." John felt the weight of it settle into his bones. The story wasn't over. The storm he had tried to escape had followed him, and now he would have to decide, run again, or face the woman who once destroyed him, and finish this for good. John had never thought he'd see Sophia break. Even in the darkest nights of their old life together, when he lay awake beside her, he believed there was an unshakable steel beneath her skin. She was fire, ambition, a storm that couldn't be stopped, and he'd once loved her for it, until that fire burned every soft thing in him to ash. When Ryan stormed into his rented room by the sea, John felt the familiar dread knot in his gut. Ryan's face was pale, sweat gleaming at his hairline. "She's not answering," he panted. "She left the lab, left me, she took the car and disappeared. You did this." John stood slowly, old pain stirring in his chest. "I didn't tell her to do anything," he said. "She came here. She tried to pull me back in. I said no." Ryan lunged at him, grabbing his shirt in trembling fists. "She's not like you, John," he spat. "She doesn't get over things. If anything happens," John shoved him back, sudden anger rising. "She made her choices. She chose you. She chose to leave me bleeding for years while she built her empire. Don't put this on me." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "You don't get it. You're the only thing she's ever really cared about. You leaving her. It killed something in her. You think you're free, but you're not. You're part of her whether you want to be or not." For a moment, John faltered. He remembered the girl Sophia had been, back when they were both young and foolish, when she gave him a clay figurine and whispered, "You'll be my forever." He remembered the way her hands shook the first time she presented her research to a crowd, how afterward she had buried her face in his chest, shaking, whispering, "I couldn't have done this without you." But then he remembered the cold mornings waiting for her to come home, the way she'd smile distractedly past him, the echo of her laughter with Ryan in empty hallways while he scrubbed away the bloodstains of his own sacrifice. He pushed past Ryan, grabbing his coat. "If you care so much, you find her," he said coldly. "I'm done cleaning up her messes." But as he stepped outside, the ocean wind biting at his cheeks, guilt coiled like a snake in his chest. What if she really was alone? What if? He cursed softly, clenching his fists, hating himself for still caring. He should let her go. He should let Ryan fix what he had broken. But his legs carried him down the darkened street anyway, past shuttered shops and lamplights buzzing in the misty air. He found her car first, parked crookedly by the pier, the passenger door flung wide open. His heart lurched painfully as he sprinted down the dock, eyes scanning the water, the dark waves swallowing every whisper of sound. Then he saw her, standing at the edge of the old pier, hair whipping around her face, shoulders shaking. For a second he thought she might jump, that he would watch the woman he once loved slip beneath the waves like a ghost. "Sophia!" he shouted, voice raw. She turned slowly, eyes red, mascara streaked across her cheeks. She looked broken in a way he'd never seen before. "John," she whispered. "Why did you stop loving me?" He froze, words catching in his throat. "Sophia. This isn't the way." She let out a strangled laugh. "Isn't it? You left me, you walked away, and everything turned grey, even Ryan. I never wanted him. I wanted you. I wanted the man who would follow me to hell, who would wait with dinner ready when I came home at 3 in the morning. John stepped closer, careful not to spook her. "I was dying, Sophia," he said softly. "Every day, I was dying. You never saw it. You never wanted to." Her lip trembled. I thought you'd never leave. I thought you'd stay no matter how cold I got. I thought that was love." John felt tears prick his own eyes. "It was love," he whispered, "but it wasn't living. I had to save myself." She sank to her knees on the damp wood, sobs racking her thin shoulders. John crouched in front of her, hesitant, remembering the warmth of her skin, the years they'd shared. He wanted to reach out, to wipe away the tears, to tell her it would be okay, but he didn't. Because he finally understood. He couldn't fix her. He couldn't patch over the cracks in her heart with his own bleeding hands anymore. "I'm sorry," she choked out, voice hoarse. "I didn't know how to love you. I was so scared you'd leave if I wasn't perfect, if I wasn't strong. So I kept running ahead, hoping you'd follow. But I never turned around to see you were falling behind." John swallowed hard. "You wanted a partner who'd disappear into your shadow," he said. "I wanted someone who'd hold my hand and walk beside me. We were never going the same way." For a long time, the only sound was the whisper of the sea, the mournful creak of old boards beneath their weight. Finally, Sophia looked up, eyes hollow. "Can you forgive me?" John closed his eyes, breathing in the salt air, the cool night wrapping around him like a shroud. "I do," he said, voice barely a whisper. "I forgive you, but I can't come back." She let out a soft, broken noise, nodding as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered. "I knew that the moment you closed the door." John stood slowly, every bone in his body aching. "You should go home," he said gently. "Ryan. He might not be the answer, but he'll wait for you." She nodded again, wiping her eyes with trembling fingers. "Will you be okay?" John smiled faintly, though it felt like his heart was splintering apart. "I will," he said. "I already am." He turned and walked back down the dock, each step heavier than the last, the weight of years of love and regret pressing against his spine. But with every breath, he felt a small piece of himself stitch back together, healing where her absence had torn him apart. At the edge of the street, he glanced back. Sophia was still kneeling on the pier, head bowed, shoulders shaking, but for the first time, he didn't feel the urge to run to her. He let her go, truly, completely, and went away toward the lights of the small town, toward a future that was finally his own. When he reached his room, he sat on the bed, trembling. Tears fell, hot and silent, soaking his palms. He grieved the life he'd lost, the love that had once felt so bright it blinded him. But beneath the grief was something gentler, something new. Hope. He would build a life from the ashes of what she'd burned. He would find someone who met him halfway, someone who didn't ask him to bleed just to prove he was worthy. Or maybe he'd stay alone, breathing salt air, teaching children about the sea. Either way, he would be whole. Outside, the tide rolled in, steady and relentless, washing the pier clean. And in the darkness, John finally let himself rest. John spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of work, teaching lessons, answering children's questions with a soft patience he hadn't known he possessed. But at night, he sat by the window, staring at the stars reflected on the dark sea, thinking of the woman he had finally left behind on the pier. Sophia didn't call again. Neither did Ryan. News reached him through old acquaintances. Sophia had stepped back from her research, citing exhaustion and health. Ryan, once so quick to be by her side, was nowhere to be seen at the conferences and award ceremonies that followed. It was as if the empire she had built was crumbling from the inside, her perfect reputation cracking beneath the weight of her own ambition. And John felt nothing. Or maybe what he felt was too vast and quiet to name. There was no gloating triumph, no smug satisfaction, just a clean emptiness, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. Months passed, spring came, washing the town in salt wind and pale blossoms. John found himself smiling more easily, laughing with the children, their bright voices filling the dusty classroom with life. He took long walks along the cliffs at dusk, breathing the sea air, letting it scrub away the last traces of her voice from his memory. One evening, he returned from the cliffs to find a package on his doorstep. No name, no return address, just his own name written in neat, careful script. He carried it inside, heart beating fast, fingers trembling as he opened the plain cardboard box. Inside was a stack of papers, Sophia's research, pages marked with her cramped notes, diagrams, half-finished conclusions. On top lay a small envelope. He opened it with numb hands. "I thought you might want to see what I did with the years you gave me. I'm tired, John. Tired of running, tired of winning battles that leave me hollow. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I want you to have this. It's yours, really, it always was. I'm sorry. I hope you can forgive me, even if I don't deserve it. Sophia." He set the note aside, breathing hard. Part of him wanted to burn the pages, to scatter the ashes into the sea, but another part of him saw the truth in her words. This was her way of surrendering, of admitting defeat. He had won, not by fighting her, but by refusing to play her game. That was his revenge, quiet, complete. A week later, news reached him through the academic grapevine. Sophia had resigned from her post at the lab. Ryan had vanished. Rumors swirled that she was traveling, that she had retreated somewhere far away to rest. Some said she had been hospitalized for exhaustion. Others whispered that her mind was fraying under the weight of her past choices. John didn't know the truth. He didn't want to. He carried her letter to the cliffs one night, standing at the edge while the sea crashed against the rocks below. He read it again, tracing the ink with trembling fingers. "I forgive you," he whispered into the wind. "But I'll never come back." And then he let the letter go, watching as the breeze caught it, tumbling it out over the dark waves. That night, he dreamed of her one last time. She stood on the pier, her hair tangled in the wind, eyes hollow and lost. But this time, when she reached for him, he turned away, walking into the dark. He woke with tears on his cheeks, but they felt clean, like rain washing dust from old stone. Spring turned to summer. John built a small greenhouse beside the classroom, teaching the children to grow herbs and flowers. He learned to cook new recipes, practicing alone in the little kitchen, letting the scent of garlic and ginger fill the empty house. Some evenings, he sat on the porch, watching the stars rise, wondering if Sophia was looking at the same sky. But the ache was gone. All that remained was a soft sadness, and the quiet certainty that he would never let her hurt him again. In the end, his revenge wasn't in seeing her suffer, it was in seeing himself heal, in building a life that had no room for her shadows. He could have destroyed her reputation, could have spread the truth of what she'd done to him, but he didn't need to. She was her own destruction. Her ambition, her hunger, her inability to love anything she couldn't control, it was eating her alive, and he didn't need to lift a finger. The children he taught grew braver, more curious, their laughter ringing out across the small schoolyard like bright bells. The town began to know him not as the man who had once been broken, but as the gentle teacher by the sea, the man who could coax life out of barren ground, who never raised his voice but somehow commanded respect all the same. One night, as he sat watching the moon rise over the waves, Ryan appeared out of the darkness, thinner than before, eyes hollow. He said nothing for a long time, just stared at John with a broken kind of envy. "I thought she'd choose me," Ryan whispered finally. "But she never really saw me, did she?" John said nothing. He had no pity left for Ryan, no hatred either, only a tired acceptance. "You should go," he said quietly. "Whatever you're looking for, it's not here." Ryan's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "She never loved anyone," he spat. "Not really." John shrugged, turning back to the sea. "Maybe," he murmured. "But that's not my burden anymore." Ryan left without another word, disappearing into the darkness. John felt no triumph, no surge of victory. Only relief. He had survived her. He had survived them both. Years later, when he looked back on that night, he would remember the way the moonlight glittered on the waves, the sound of children's laughter drifting faintly through the open window behind him. He would remember the weight of Sophia's letter in his hand, the way it lifted when he let it go. He would remember that this was the night he finally set himself free. Tears pricked his eyes, hot and aching, but they weren't for Sophia, or for Ryan, or for the man he used to be. They were for the man he had become, the life he had built, the quiet peace he had earned through years of bleeding and breaking and healing again. He stood, wiping his face, breathing the salt air into his lungs until they burned. The world felt wide and empty, but he was no longer afraid of emptiness. It meant space to grow, space to become someone he could love, even if no one else ever did. Somewhere out there, Sophia might be crying in another man's arms, or chasing a new dream, or sitting alone in a dark room, remembering the man she once thought would never leave. It didn't matter. He was done. And as he turned back toward the warm glow of his little house, the laughter of children floating through the window, he felt something crack open in his chest, something soft and trembling and new. It wasn't love, it wasn't triumph, it was freedom, and it was enough.